So welcome to our review of The Master. Just so you know, this discussion will contain spoilers. Not that there's a whole lot to spoil with The Master, but we will be talking about the story from beginning to end.
Just go see the movie right now.
Go see the movie right now and spoil it yourself.
If you can see it in 70 millimeter, please do.
It's recommended.
Even though it's recommended but not essential.
No. If you see this on your iPhone while riding the bus, you see it in 7 parts. You're going to get the same exact thing that you would get if you went to go see it in 70 millimeter. It's the same exact experience.
Yeah, I actually just closed my eyes when we saw the movie.
You were just so awash with the PTA-ness of this movie.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. Why do you think he shot it in 70 millimeter? 65, actually.
To be precise.
Film buffs like it.
To some degree, it's kind of like Neil Young recording in these insane bitrate digital formats. It's kind of like that's really his thing, is fidelity and stuff like that. And 65 millimeter will give you the best possible image, like even against the red camera and everything like that.
I can't help. Well, I'm glad you brought the red camera up because I can't help but think in this day and age that Paul Thomas Anderson is trying to make some sort of statement.
Yes,
especially with with one of his favorite directors, Martin Scorsese, going digital. I think he's really saying something about the medium,
about film
and where
itself.
It's going, and what film can do.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Because that's the thing. It does look great. I mean, it's very well shot, but at the same time, it's not something that would be lent to a larger format necessarily, especially when you think about Lawrence of Arabia. You think about 2001. It's not necessarily huge on that scope. But it does make you wonder, like, what would There Will Be Blood look like if it was on 65?
You got to think about how much pressure that put on him when he was shooting the movie, because there's a lot more detail. You see a lot more. Joseph, you might know...
Mortimer.
Do we want to assign fake names to everybody?
Mulan.
I will call me the Lizard King.
Ooh, he can do anything.
I'm not calling you the Lizard King.
That's thing 1, and this is thing 2. No, go ahead.
Well, let me just say about the 65 millimeter, in case we're not trailing off, I just want to say really quick that the 65 millimeter is a lot more expensive to shoot with.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. It's like, because he was having problems getting money for this in the first place, but that must have added many monies to the budget.
That would have added a lot more pressure too, because you got to get this thing right, because this is expensive. You know, with digital, you're just recording right to a hard drive, and the only thing it's costing you is hard drive space.
Something I don't know about PTA is how much footage he shoots, actually, because I know that David Fincher shoots a lot of footage. He does a lot of takes.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
I don't know. I heard Quentin Tarantino likes to shoot until he's sure they got the shot and they got it right.
And then he just moves on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how...
I would imagine that Paul Thomas Anderson, I feel like the way he works, I don't want to speculate too much, but I feel like he probably does more rehearsal and working one-on-one with the actors.
So kind of more the Altman way, where it's you just work it out, you drill and drill and drill, and then you shoot just a couple times?
Yeah. Well, I think you see that in the behind the scenes for Magnolia. You see that he really knows what he wants.
Well, that's something to bring up too, talking about shooting in 65, is it's very deliberate. Everything is framed, not in a way you would expect for a larger format too. There's a lot of close-ups, a lot of even like extreme close-ups, which is kind of surprising.
Extreme close-ups, and also with those extreme close-ups on that big frame, the depth of focus is so short. It's like their eyeball is in focus, and then everything from their nose to their ears
goes
like
soft.
Out of focus. It's amazing.
Definitely.
That's what I wanted to ask you, Joseph. Does having a larger film size, does that affect the depth of focus at all?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because it changes the lenses and it changes...
Because I noticed some very shallow depth of focus.
Very.
Yeah,
Well,
it's because the frame is so big. The larger the frame, the shorter the depth of focus. It also goes for shooting in IMAX when they shot The Dark Knight. You could have like a medium or a wide of just a guy, and he will be in focus, and everything from behind him, in front of him, like 3 feet, will then start blurring. And it also goes for digital cameras too, because instead of recording on a frame, they're recording on a chip. And the smaller the chip, the longer the depth of focus is going to be. The larger the chip, especially on the red cameras, which have large chips that light projects on, the depth of focus becomes very short. You can see that on the social.
And it gets to the point where you just can't pour enough light in there to kind of get the focus.
Yeah, because like you were saying, there's a scene at the end. There's a lot of extreme low angle close-ups in this movie. And,
Or like over the shoulder like type of stuff too,
yeah.
like looking back. Very kind of interesting things like that.
But in that last scene, their last conversation, there's a close-up of Joaquin Phoenix, and he's out of focus. You could tell. Only like his nose was in focus.
There's one shot, I think, from
I
that
thought
same...
there was one where it was his ear was in focus, and then his eye and his nose started going.
That's exactly what I was going to mention. It's like his hairline
Yeah.
on his right shoulder was in focus, but he starts to get soft from there. It's really kind of... And I mean, again, watching it on your TV at home, you might not notice, but it's a very big screen
Yeah.
when you see it projected in 70 or 65 millimeter.
Do you think that wasn't intentional?
I think that might have
Focus,
been a goof. I
focus,
think,
or-
yeah, I think that might have been a mistake. Just because when they're filming, they get even with film cameras, they still get these nice digital preview monitors. No matter how sharp those monitors get, they can't truly reflect what it looks like to have that frame blown up. So
And that would be another expense too, because if he was doing dailies, he might have seen something like that, and maybe they're not doing film dailies. They're not printing all the footage they shoot in a day and looking at it projected on a screen, and because that would be something where you'd be like, oh, well, we'll pick that up because that, the camera assistant measured that wrong, or we set the ring wrong, and that's just soft. I don't want that. Or maybe he did want it. Maybe he's like, oh, it looks like film. There's kind of a lot of conjecture, but. It could be either of those.
I don't think that would really stand out too much if you just like watched it on a Blu-ray in 1080p.
Not at all. Yeah, not at all.
Technically, the master could be screened in an IMAX screen, couldn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah.
But what
That
I was
wouldn't
wondering...
be the ideal setting for seeing it.
No, because it would be kind of like when they did those upconverts for the Harry Potter movies or for the Matrix. They digitally printed like a 2:3:5 matte on the top and bottom, so it wasn't filling the whole screen like, for example, the stuff that they shot for the IMAX cameras, for Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises. So did you notice a lot, just as an aside, did you notice a lot of like film movement on the titles?
I noticed that too.
And the only reason I can think of is because you don't see that in IMAX, because from what I've read, the projectors have like a vacuum seal that presses the film against the film gate.
Yeah.
So you don't get that jitter. It's just the negative itself, the print itself.
Or
is
I
so
heard it was
big.
like a fan that
just keeps
yeah.
keeps it against that projecting glass. I think that's kind of interesting because the print itself is so big that
Speaking of the wavering, I notice the waver happening. I saw it happen in on the DVD for There Will Be Blood. There's no reason for that other than if that's a post effect in this day and age.
They put that in there.
Yeah, they're doing that for effect. The little, because our minds expect to see that now in movies.
I wouldn't be
that little
surprised
wavering
if that's something
going on.
Paul Thomas Anderson requested.
Yeah.
Instead, like it didn't look right unless it had it.
Yeah, because
That type
when
of
it's
thing.
when it's running through your computer, from your whatever Final Cut or whatever, it's just perfectly still.
Well, we've done that when we made our movies. We added blur and wiggle to our credits because it just makes it look cooler.
Yeah,
Looks
it's
better.
more aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
Makes it
looks-
feel less like it was just like rendered and it's a computer file.
It looks less like video.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, let's just dive right into the movie. Why don't we just talk about the beginning? What did you guys think of the opening shot? I feel like all of Paul Thomas
Yeah.
Anderson's movies have a distinctive...
With all of Paul Thomas
powerful
Anderson's
opening.
movies, the first 10 minutes, a lot of love is put into those first 10 minutes.
Well, I'm just talking about the very opening, the title. But think about Boogie Nights. That has an incredible opening
it
with
starts
the
with like a
circus music.
prologue. What do you call it? The musical.
Almost like an overture against
Overture,
against
yeah,
black
yeah.
screen, basically.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
It reminds me of Do the Right Thing.
Well, you were talking about how important the intros are, and I think the reason that you feel, not only does there a lot of work that goes into the intros, but it tells you everything that you need to know without verbally saying it about these characters that you're going to be spending time with. Definitely happened in Boogie Nights. I mean, he introduces probably 8 to 10 characters in 2.5 minutes. Definitely, I mean, my favorite choice still is There Will Be Blood. It tells you a lot without saying anything verbally about Daniel
Yeah.
Plainview and what to expect. And in this one, it tells you a lot about Freddie, Joaquin Phoenix's character. It tells you a lot just by observing him.
But the master starts right away with with
Yeah.
the wake of the boat.
It's a good shot to set the movie up for the turbulent turning of the water and the, you know.
It's something that they cut back to
A number of times.
a number of times. Yeah.
It starts with the water, and then it cuts to a shot of Joaquin Phoenix in a helmet, just staring over the edge of the boat, I think.
Which is a great shot. It's a great shot, and it's like a minute long, and it sets Joaquin Phoenix up really nice because there's the helmet on top of his head. There's the blurry edge of the boat right under his eyes, and you just see his eyes wandering and then squinting off to the side, and that's our introduction to
That's
him.
our main character. Yeah, then it kind of meanders on for a while with him on the beach. I have to say that's one of my favorite little moments when he starts fucking that sand woman, and then he starts fingering her, and it just goes on for way too long.
It goes on way too long, and you can see all on the faces of all the other guys around.
Absolutely,
like,
yeah.
It starts out funny, and then it's a little weird, and
And then it gets really weird, and then he
And
doesn't know.
And then it cuts to him just jerking off.
Yeah.
Yeah, into
on the
ocean.
beach.
Everyone else seems to be kind of used to it.
I think my favorite shot out of that entire sequence, and it says a lot too. By the way, like there's nothing redundant in any of this intro. Every little setup kind of tells us something a little bit different. My personal choice was after he had gotten wasted on torpedo fuel, and he's way up top, and he's just sprawled out, and all of the other sailors that are with him are just throwing things at him. It's
That
like,
tells you a lot right there.
Yeah,
It tells
here's-
you that's not the first time that's happened.
Absolutely, and not only that, but it's just like these people, like he just doesn't connect with these people, he doesn't understand, they don't understand him necessarily, he's kind of the odd man out surrounded by people.
Yeah, there was never a friend with him.
Right.
There was never his Biggs to his Luke Skywalker.
Completely.
No one holding with their hand on his
The
shoulder.
movie starts telling us that Freddy is a very disturbed person, and we never really learn why, except for the fact that he's been through the war.
And it's interesting that he's in the Navy. Not to say that people in the Navy didn't get post-traumatic stress disorder, but you kind of get the impression that he had things that were kind of wrong to begin with, and they didn't know what to do with them, and it's kind of like, well, it's obviously post-traumatic stress.
Because we do get flashbacks later in the movie to when he was just joining.
Yeah,
And
he
he's
seems-
still pretty wonky.
weird. Yeah, he's still got problems.
I mean, this might have made it worse. That could definitely be.
Sure.
But it's ambiguous.
So he kind of meanders around for a while. He ends up on a boat and meets Lancaster Dodd, the Philip Seymour Hoffman character.
Something that we're kind of skipping over right now is that there are some brief scenes that kind of show him trying to find a place in post-war America.
Yeah.
There's a scene
The
Unsuccessfully.
department store, he was picking cabbages, in all of these different scenarios he got kind of chased out or kind of sabotaged himself.
He wasn't so much a victim though. I mean, it was his own fault, but it was his own fault. He suffered some mental disorders.
Yes.
When I think about the movie and I think about the palette, the colors, I think a lot about that department store segment.
The light blues and
I mean, it really felt like the
seafoam
period.
greens and
You know,
yeah.
I imagine, I haven't read anything about the cinematographer yet or what his palette was or what he was going for, but just the impression you get is Kodachrome. And just like with Private Ryan, our impression of World War II is black and white or very desaturated. This is the same thing. Post-war 50s is Kodachrome. Very orange, lots of like light blues, lots of yellows. Like that's how we...
It feels like the tint is just kind of shifted over a little bit for everything. Kind of like when you
Completely.
take your TV and you just shift the tint over.
Because that's how we, being people that didn't live through it, experience it. It's like, so then that feels real.
that's right. Yeah, I mean, this whole movie, and I think starting with even a little bit with Punch Drunk Love, PTA has a very classical style.
When I think Punch Drunk Love, I think high contrast and heavy saturation. Like his blue suit, Adam Sandler's blue suit is really blue, and he's throwing also in those when he's bookending the chapters of the movie. I guess there's like these colors that he's throwing at you. These really bright colors, which look like I don't know, like city lights or something like that. But he does like to have a real strong color tone with his movies. You know, like There Will Be Blood. It's very brownish.
Black and brown.
Yeah, black and brown and orangey.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, Freddie meets Lancaster Dodd aboard his ship, and that's where we get the scene from the trailer where they're introduced to each other, and he kind of gets taken under his wing, sort of. We don't get a whole lot of information.
Lancaster Dodd seems to just want him to make more of that moonshine.
He just kind of wants him to be around.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. I remember that threw me off a little bit at first when they show him mixing up his moonshine, because it's not just alcohol. It's
Yeah, it's
But
like,
he's not just distilling alcohol. He's mixing paint thinner.
Well, that's something that I've definitely read about in many different wars you hear about in Vietnam and things like that too, is when you don't have access to alcohol and you still have time off, you find substitutes for alcohol. So you'll hear different stories. I've heard it from different locations where they find ways to mix these things together that you shouldn't drink, that would normally kill you, but just kind of get you extremely hungover. There's that there's that scene. It was like, oh no, it won't kill you if you drink it right.
yeah.
Like like he's definitely trying to self-medicate. That's pretty apparent too, because even though it's dangerous, he still manages to do it. I thought it was interesting that even though he is back home and has access to all these various different intoxicants, he chooses to still mix his own crazy concoctions.
Yeah.
That's right.
You don't learn where he learns this craft, too.
But you kind of learn enough. Like you figure, like, well, he's done enough trial and error. He's been dealing.
Yeah.
He's been dealing with being Joaquin Phoenix enough to
Yeah.
have to
And
deal
maybe
with
that's
it.
where a lot of his problems come
Yeah,
from.
he's been drinking some bad moonshine all his life. Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But that brings up the next thing of, like, you're not really quite sure why Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, Lancaster Dodd, it seems, you get the impression that he warms to Freddie. But then again, we're kind of seeing the movie through Freddie's eyes.
Yeah.
So in that way, it's kind of like Punch Drunk Love. You're not really sure what to believe is real or not.
Yeah, especially when we're coming toward the end, you don't know what's real or not.
Right, yeah.
Didn't it also feel like Dodd wanted to use Joaquin Phoenix as like a guinea pig or something like that? He's a perfect test subject. He's got mental problems.
Yeah.
He saw him as a very weak person. I think he told him things to make him feel bigger. Mm-hmm. But he knew that he was very weak and that he was
Manipulated, easy to manipulate.
easy to manipulate.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting point, because you see through the rest of the movie that he goes to all of these very wealthy people's homes that have white people problems, and is talking about their past lives and blah 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 blah. And maybe that's the reason why he wants to keep Freddie around, is to have somebody that has serious, genuine emotional problems, and see if he can kind of tinker with that a little bit.
Does Lancaster Dodd genuinely care about Joaquin Phoenix?
That is the question of the master, I think. Whereas with There Will Be Blood,
He says like, I'm the only one who likes you, and that was just like seconds after, fuck you, like.
yeah, you know how some people argued, like, oh, Daniel Plainview didn't care about his adopted son, where it's like, it was very obvious, I think, that he did, and this is kind of like,
he just didn't know how to deal with. He didn't know how to deal with the emotion of being brokenhearted by him wanting to be on his own.
yeah, he doesn't understand that.
You hurt me, I'm gonna hurt you back. You're a bastard in a basket.
That's all you know. Yeah, that's all you know. With this one, I think it's a little bit more up to argument. I mean, that's really one of the little scenes that stood out the most to me, is he's working that department store job. He's a photographer, and for whatever reason, whether he's jealous of that man that has a wife, or he's just fed up with this photography job, or whatever it is, like, he just intentionally antagonizes that guy to where he's throwing things at him, and it's really interesting to watch.
And that's one of the first real outbursts of violence in that movie, with many more to follow.
Well, wasn't that because his date didn't go well with that lady? Remember?
He didn't get laid?
He didn't get late. No, he fell asleep at dinner, remember? And then right after, he's obviously agitated, trying to get the camera all focused up and everything like that. He can't get a working relationship to ever happen for him, unless it's one night stands after moonshine, probably. But he can't ever genuinely be close to a woman ever.
It's the sand
So
woman
then he
problem.
lashes it out on this married man. That's the sense I got from the way it was cut, and
Definitely. I can see that.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the violence in this movie. As with that scene, a lot of the fight scenes, or I guess we should say Joaquin Phoenix beating people up scenes, were shot with the camera pulled back a little bit. It kind of felt like you were from a spectator point of view.
Yeah,
and it made it more disturbing.
especially when they're long, unbroken shots too.
Yeah. And I haven't read anything about this, but all that violence seemed very real. It looks like he really hit him. And at the end, when he slaps that guy, I'm wondering if they just went for real violence when they shot it, because I didn't look like they were pulling any punches.
I think they may have. I picture an actor saying, "Yeah, go ahead, hit me for real."
Because
but
you can
make sure
tell.
you get it. Make sure you get the shot, because I don't have to go through that again. Especially when it's in 65 millimeter, you can't fake that.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is you can tell when you're kind of pulling your punches. So it's like, well,
Yeah.
go for it. You know, it's for real. Film is forever.
Not like The Godfather.
Yeah.
Remember when James Caan was supposed to be being that guy? He's like 5 inches away from his head when he's just swinging his fist.
Well, that's also why it's far away, right? We'll add sound effects. They're not watching the movie; they're listening to the music.
So once Freddie gets with Lancaster Dodd, that's kind of where we stay for most of the movie. Different things happen, but not a whole lot changes between them. And that's something that's really interesting about this movie is, I've read a lot of reviews. People say this is a character study. But I feel like these characters don't really change that much.
They don't really go anywhere. It's kind of like they kind of do sort of... None of the characters feel like they've gone through like an evolutionary period where they've learned something. Or...
That might be intentional with Freddie, of course, because that's kind of the ultimate point. At least one of the points of the movie is that he's kind of back at square one to jump ahead and ruin everything.
You ruined everything. Podcast
What about
over.
Dodd? with Dodd though, by the time we're in England, they're doing pretty well for themselves, right?
They're doing
Isn't it
much
safe
better.
to say that the cause has progressed and he's got a giant office and
Definitely. He has more influence. He's traveling the world. That also seems
it's
to be...
definitely Hubbard in the 60s.
Yeah, that
when
seems to be...
Scientology was at its height.
The point is that he's not staying in one place too long. For some reason, he's always on boats.
Yeah.
He's having monkey fights. I don't know why. But yeah, that's kind of one of the things where he's always trying to... It seems like he's always trying to stay one step ahead, especially after he's arrested that first time.
Yeah. That was Hubbard in Scientology. I mean, they never stayed in one spot for very long. They were always moving around. And the harassment, they were always being harassed. And there was being, because they were hated. So they were on boats all the time.
So Scientologists were like the gypsies of the 50s?
Yeah. They spent a lot of time on boats, which allowed them to do a lot of private stuff, and it was easier for Hubbard to be more of like an emperor when you are in control over that one, boat, as opposed to like no one else can go anywhere else. So when you're the captain of that boat, like you're more in charge than say if you're in a building and they could just leave the building and go somewhere else.
Yeah, where are they going to go?
Yeah. Oh, remember in The Master when Freddie comes to visit Dodd, his wife is there in the office and she chides him for a little bit and she says something like, "You either do this for 1 billion years or you don't."
Yeah.
Right.
That's actually in Scientology. You sign a 1 billion-year contract.
She was committed.
No, she believed it all.
I feel like she was more committed than Lancaster Dodd.
Yeah. I feel more like Lancaster Dodd, if the chips were down, he would cash out everything with like money in his hands and just like run. I don't think he would stay with the cause to the bitter end, I feel like he would jump ship.
Yeah.
That was the captain that would not go down with the ship.
But
she might though, but he wouldn't.
And this is also, this is the thing that he pretty much founded, so that's kind of interesting.
That's why interesting that his wife buys it so much.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know a lot about Mary Sue Hubbard. I knew that Mary Sue Hubbard was guilty of trying to infiltrate the FBI. I don't know if Mary Sue Hubbard believed in literally Xenu and all of that. But
And controlled.
She was a good soldier for Scientology, but I don't know if she believed in all of it, knowing that she was just right alongside Hubbard, writing this at his typewriter.
And she didn't control Hubbard from the shadows.
No. No. Hubbard was always in control. Hubbard had some really interesting bouts of depression where he would lock himself away and just bury his head in his lap and just cry and stuff like that. And then he had other periods where he was the life of the party. He had these weird shifts between life of the party and depressed, yelling, "I don't want to talk to you," slamming the door, hiding himself away, which you didn't see in The Master so much.
That's what I wanted to bring up. I feel like you got to see the kind of ringleader Hubbard a lot more in this movie. So maybe, again, that's Freddie's perspective. He's seeing somebody that looks functional, that has all the answers, that has a way to kind of give him a spot.
I think it might be safe to say that Freddie kind of idealized him. Remember, father's talking, you might learn something. He believed in it. And even when his own son is saying something, he's ready to pick a fight with the guy's son over it. Mm-hmm. That was interesting, too. That was the guy's son. And all he had to say was he was just making it all up as he goes along, and then Freddie's ready to beat the shit out of him.
One of the things we were talking about...
It's a good thing the cops showed up, because that thing was ready to spin out of control.
Completely. And one of the things we were talking about is that arc with Freddie realizing maybe this isn't real. Maybe this is all nonsense. It comes from the son. If that scene had never happened... That's kind of what started
things. It wasn't that guy who was just trying to break up the party, talking about cults and stuff like that, because remember we threw the apple at him, and he went over to his room and beat the shit out of him. that wasn't anything. That was just some outside. That was an SP. That was an outside, antagonizer. But the son, that probably messed him up a little bit. In fact, yeah, it seemed that hearing the son say that kind of like broke his heart a little bit more. Like he was mad at him because you're making me rethink something.
Because immediately after that, there's the scene where he gets arrested and then they end up in jail because of the brouhaha, and then that's the confrontation. That's really like the climax of the story. Is that jail scene?
The jail scene is great.
Yeah.
Really? I felt like the jail scene was the one scene that fell a little flat for me.
No, it didn't fall flat for me. I love that shot. It's an unbroken shot where we follow the prisoners taking Joaquin Phoenix, and then when this is how you do a long unbroken shot when we're looking at all these connecting events, and then they get him inside the shot. When they come coming from the side of the frame is Dodd, who's leaning against one of the bunks, and you see him freak out and break that toilet, and you see his shoulder blades doing weird shit, and this is all one take, and you think like, man, you can only do this shot so many times,
right?
And these actors are getting it just right, and then right as like a punchline, boom, at perfect timing, Philip Seymour Hoffman says, "Your fear of being imprisoned is an implant," or something like that. Like, we're not done with the insanity just yet. We're gonna keep this madness rolling on a little bit longer.
And what's interesting, well, I don't mean to say that it fell flat for me because of the performances or anything like that. This is, again, why this movie is going to require a second viewing. But I think I was expecting something different from that scene. I'm not sure what it was, but I think I was expecting more of a confrontation. And I think that's what's interesting about this movie is that even after that confrontation that they had...
They're excavating his works, right? Doesn't that happen like shortly after?
Nothing really changed.
Yeah.
Freddie is still with him.
Yeah.
Like they get out of jail and he's still there being his low-level enforcer, basically.
He even comes back as kind of a hero. Remember that little scene when they welcome Freddie back to the house? And
they wrestle on the...
Yeah.
That's another great shot, too, because... without cutting, he wrestles him to the ground, and we're kind of like shocked, like, oh, they're just kind of roughhousing, and they're all laughing and stuff like that. That's a great shot.
He's back in the pack, in the wolf pack.
Yeah.
So what does Freddie want? Why does Freddie keep coming back?
Because that's a place that took him in, I think.
It's a place that took him in. It's a place that can give him answers. I mean, I think that's the fundamental issue, and that's the idea of the title, The Master, one of, at least, is... this is somebody that has it totally figured out, or at the very least has their hands on the tail, and they're gonna they're gonna write all these books, and they're gonna travel the world, and they're gonna cure everybody's possible diseases. And,
there's something I wanted to talk about. That title is The Master. That title, is that a loaded title?
Yeah,
because you could also say The Master as a matter of fact, like this is about a guy who was the master. But also, the master can also be put cynically.
Definitely.
Oh, he's the master. Oh, he's the master of deception or something like that.
Definitely. There's also a titular line in there somewhere, isn't there?
There's a number. I mean, they refer to him as master. I think, I think they do say the master a few times even.
But yeah, that movie does require multiple viewings because I'm still trying to figure out, like, what was Hoffman or what was Dodd saying to Freddie about, like, you can go, and if you ever find a way of life without masters, come back and let us know about it.
Completely.
Or something like that.
Completely. The thing that I was comparing it to was actually the later period Kubrick stuff like Full Metal Jacket, where you can watch Full Metal Jacket and it's just a story about Vietnam era military. It's boot camp and it's deployment and beginning, middle, and end. Like, that's fine. But there's a lot of subtext there if you want to dig it up, if you want to spend the time to dig it up and what he's saying about dehumanizing people to fight wars. So I think that The Master is like that in a lot of ways too, because it's not giving you anything clear-cut. It's not saying cults are bad. It's saying, like, these are some of the factors that lead to the success of cults, almost, in a way, even though that sounds
what
kind of trite.
What kind of people are drawn to cults?
Yeah, and how, and the kind of effect and why that would be attractive,
Well, but I walked away from the movie not thinking about cults.
No.
I was thinking about Freddie.
Yeah. Again, like I said before, I think I mentioned before we decided to start recording, which was the cult, the Scientology thing kind of just seemed like an incidental thing that he just happened to run into. It could have been any other thing,
But he's also he's somebody that is set up to kind of find something like what he found with Lancaster Dodd, which is somebody offering a lot of answers. Where if it was 1920, he would have found Eli Sunday, and he would have been part of that that whole crowd.
And he probably would have wanted to beat the shit out of Daniel Plainview.
Completely.
For threatening Eli Sunday.
Completely, and Daniel Plainview would have to like smash his head in with a rock or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of too many movies where our main character is so down and out. Such a loser.
That's interesting.
And remains a loser. The movie's not really about his road to recovery.
No.
Or anything like that. And so what is he saying with that?
That's what
What does Freddie represent?
Is Freddie beyond help like the wife said? He's beyond help. He's insane. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. Not a lot of movies take a character as their main character who is someone who's beyond help, because ultimately audiences want a character who gets some kind of resolution toward the end or something, which doesn't happen. He's still laying beside that sand woman at the end like nothing's.
That's what I thought was kind of interesting is you kind of get used to the idea of the protagonist being this kind of surrogate for the director or the writer. And early on, probably after the first act, you realize like, oh no, he's his own character.
Yeah.
Like this isn't somebody that's necessarily going to have an arc.
This isn't that he isn't acting. He's not P.T. Anderson's avatar into something. I think what I was thinking also before is that the Master kind of fits in those sort of the other sort of P.T. Anderson vibe, in that P.T. Anderson likes to make movies where humanity is kind of like in a fishbowl for the audience to kind of observe. So that's, again, it still feels more like we're just sort of observing these things happen. And a lot of other reviewers have said, like, he always keeps us at arm's length from everything that's happening, but that's kind of what he does,
Yeah.
We're observing, like,
We're observing...
There's like a P.T. Anderson zoo with mankind in it.
Yeah, we're observing humans being human.
Yeah.
Flaws and all. And I think maybe that's kind of what Lancaster Dodd sees in Freddie, is that Lancaster Dodd is, he introduces himself as a prophet, a nuclear physicist.
I'm a writer, a theoretical philosopher, a nuclear physicist.
But above all, I am a man.
Just like you.
I think he kind of seeks that humanity in Freddie because he sees somebody failing and somebody struggling.
Oh, yeah. No, Dodd thinks very highly of himself, I think. And he doesn't like being challenged, or he doesn't like anyone coming at him with some sort of holes in his thinking that they've found, because then he starts getting loud and violent. And yeah, Freddie is very human. Freddie's a very human character.
Is Freddie a challenge to his theories? No. I mean, that's the thing that I was trying to kind of figure out is because we're not really kind of led into that. We're kind of left to figure that out for ourselves, which isn't a bad thing. But what is...
Also, let's talk about Dodd and his relationships. Dodd doesn't have... Have we seen anyone else that could be like Dodd's friend?
No. So that's
Dodd's buddy?
No.
This guy, Dodd, he has no real friends. No one like... You guess... remember that one guy who's pretending to be Plainview's brother, that actor? He shows up and he looks like he's kind of like a friend, but later, in that one room with the books, it's like, oh, he's just...
This is nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. He doesn't really have any friends, and I think he really wants Freddie to stay at the end. It's why he sings him that song. He wants to be on a longboat to China with him. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want Freddie to leave, because now he's just going to go back to his world of riches and fame and power, but he doesn't have anybody to relate to, nobody to drink moonshine with.
He does have a lot of people around him telling him how brilliant he is all the time, and that type of thing, that kind of like fame issue, where it's like, yeah, thank you, but that's not solving my problem.
I think also it might be the fact that Lancaster Dodd probably knows he's full of shit, and the only thing he's ever praised for is a bunch of bullshit. Like, the only person who ever came to him was Freddie.
Well,
which is sad. Which is really, really sad.
Right. Which gives weight to the final scene. Mm-hmm. Well, don't worry. I mean, I'm sure there will be a prequel, Rise of the Dodd, and we'll find out why he's so dependent.
Yeah, let's talk about that ending.
The last line is...
Put
it back in, it fell out.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, what sticks with me from that scene is that Freddie is happy.
Yeah.
And he tries to do the sign. He tries to do the
lingo, the tech. He tries to apply the tech onto other people.
But I don't think he's doing it earnestly.
No,
I
he's
think
having fun with it.
Yeah, and that's what it is. And the last scene with Freddie, he's very happy. The last scene with Lancaster Dodd, he's very sad to see Freddie go. And I
Yeah.
think that says a lot about what this movie is trying to say. He says, it fell out, put it back in, and then it cuts back to that shot from the beginning of the movie with him lying next to the Sandwoman. And then it cuts to black, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Steve compared it to the I was cured all right. You kind of do get that kind of an impression where it's kind of like this full circle. Like it's not an arc, it's a full circle.
Oh, I was cured all right, the Clockwork Orange ending.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't have the same satirical purposes. It's definitely more downbeat. It's definitely, you feel for Fred. I think you're supposed to feel for Freddie at that. When you see that shot again at the end, you're kind of like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing's really changed.
So is that the moral of the story is the cult doesn't help?
But I think the cult feeds off of
Yeah.
those afflictions, but also at the same time going back to people that have parents from the World War II generation. I think that's also very apropos.
Yeah.
You know, there's things they wouldn't talk about. They're kind of distant, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are also people that kind of lived through the Depression. They also had kind of a different upbringing and a different outlook on life. And their children basically whine, why are they so distant? You know?
Yeah, I heard that one of the reasons why Scientology got to flourish was because they came out of that post-World War II mindset. I mean, after being traumatized by such horrors and the depths that we're able to plummet to, maybe Xenu ain't such a bad idea after all, you know?
Yeah.
Also, that also goes for the Christian tent revivals and, you know, the what is now conservative Christianity breeding out of, you know, the political and social stuff going on after Vietnam. And war seems to have that effect on societies. We start to have like these weird evangelical moments in, I guess what you call like a war hangover. You know, we start doing weird stuff.
So it wouldn't be a stretch to say that we're kind of going through something like that now.
Yeah, I think after the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, you know, maybe a Mormon president doesn't sound so crazy.
I think that that's one of the interests in making this movie. I think it's, again, I kind of hope that it's part of an American trilogy where I was like, when I saw There Will Be Blood, I was like, this is exactly America at this point. This is this conflict. This is exactly what it is. And like, what does it cost to be successful? What does it cost to be able to be king of the hill, basically?
What is
what do you have to
Inherent Vice
sacrifice
about?
along the way? What'd you say?
What is his next movie, Inherent Vice? What is that about?
I don't necessarily intend for Inherent Vice to be like the next PTA movie, you know?
Because it is an adaptation.
It is an adaptation. So his you know, out of me projecting on Paul Thomas Anderson saying I want an America trilogy, like it could be anything. It doesn't have to be Inherent Vice. But I wouldn't expect Inherent Vice to necessarily be the third movie in this.
I think he's going to want to do something with family. He seems to be interested in family or, you know, what would you call that family in between Dodd and Freddie, though? What would you call it? What kind of family?
Well, a lot of people in these reviews that I've read, and they talk about the PTA movies, they talk about surrogate fathers and surrogate sons.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One that kind of, on the AV Club, they were talking about was, you know, the father-son dynamic between Plainview and Eli Sunday, but there's also that adopted son dynamic that's in there too. Mm-hmm. The obvious one in Boogie Nights is between Mark Wahlberg's character, Dirk Diggler,
and Burt Reynolds.
Well, more so with, what's her name? Red hair.
Oh, completely, yeah, between Roller Girl.
She's totally her mom.
Yeah, to the point where they literally say that.
Yeah, where he starts yelling, "You're not my mom."
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
But she continues to love him like a son, even though he fucks her in one porn scene.
Yeah. Surrogate families, I think, is a major running theme through all of these. And, I mean, that's even in Magnolia. Surrogate families and like, well, my real family doesn't work, so I'm going to create one of my own that's the support system. And you could see a cult being a surrogate family. Yeah. One that's kind of twisted behind closed doors.
Well, that's especially what makes a cult so strong for people, is that the sense of family they get, you know. Now, when it comes to my expectations going into The Master, I'm going off of There Will Be Blood, and I'm expecting more of a straight cut to what the main theme is. And I'm picturing, looking at the trailer and everything, I'm picturing a critique on cults and religion, and we're just going to cut right to the heart of it because this is P.T. Anderson going full, like, we're going to cut right into it. I got Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix, so we're going for it, baby. But that's not kind of what we get.
Yeah, I was really expecting something much more sensational. And I think we got something a little more laid back.
Well, I think that there's just a lot of anger in There Will Be Blood. I think it's everything post 9/11 up until when it was released in 2007, 2008. It kind of, that's why it was so cathartic, is like it feels like that everything of those past few years were just leading up to this movie, or like just being indirectly dealt with, and that's not necessarily the case with this one. This is kind of like after the Hangover type of thing.
Yeah, because this is after a war anyway. So that is it's the Hangover movie.
Well, it's like, like
Post-war hangover,
Yeah.
post-fighting hangover.
we're the heroes. Now what? Everything that we've done in the past 5 years, that doesn't serve us any purpose at home. What do we do? And what do you do when it's like nobody wants to deal with you?
Yeah, it's interesting that the time of this movie too, because this is a time where a lot of people are coming home, probably with post-traumatic stress disorder, from
Among other
Iraq
things,
and
yeah.
Afghanistan. So, I don't think PTA was being irresponsible. I don't think there's anything to be offended with someone suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder.
No, I don't think he's making a statement.
I don't think he's making a statement about soldiers, like, oh, you come home crazy like this guy, just nothing,
Well, you read about people not only getting out of the military, but they spend a few years in jail and they get out and they're like, I'm used to somebody telling me this is when our workout is, like from this hour to this hour. I'm used to being fed at this time, and it's like I got to decide all of this stuff myself, and it's kind of rough, and not knowing how to deal with different social situations. That's definitely the case. You see in the department store and picking cabbages. There's these two distinct situations that are going on, and he can't really deal with either of them.
Yeah, I mean, for a guy like Freddie, getting in fights with other soldiers in the mess hall was probably a common and accepted thing to happen every so often. But in real life, in society, in American society, you can't do that. You can't get by doing that. So
Yeah, Freddie seemed to think he could just beat anybody up who disagreed with him or got in his way. Which he did, and he pretty much got away with.
Which, I might add, I mean, not to harp on it, it's a very American concept. It's a very American. I don't want to go so far as to say fascist because he's not killing them. But, you disagree with me? I don't care. I'm going to whomp on your head. I don't care. It's a very current American theme.
That's true. And that's kind of the theme of Scientology right now.
Well, twice he whomps on people who questioned the master.
They disagree with him.
Which is the more fascist thing. Which was master is master. I don't, whether you're the son or that other guy from the city who was questioning the book and everything like that. Or the guy who broke up the party, with his questions, and he threw the apple at him and then came to his room later on. Like that's the more fascist part, which is you question my master. Master is master. I stomp on you because you are the weak and you are the stupid. So.
Philip Seymour Hoffman is the only person that can help you if you're on the side of the road. So you better hope that it's him.
Well, he has to.
Yeah, he has to help you.
I think I read somewhere that the Master had like one of the largest, I don't know if it broke some record for like limited opening.
What it was a dollar amount per screen because it's in limited release and people want to see it in 70 because they've heard that it's like, you got to go to specific places to see it. Projected in 70. And yeah, dollar amount per screen. It broke a new record. So it wasn't in a ton of screens, but it made a lot of money in the places that.
But I doubt it's going to do that well.
So we're talking great box office for the limited release it had.
Completely, yeah. People where it was playing, people went. They went out of their way to go see it.
Wow, that's very good. Well, we know people will get their fix when they're looking just for performances because the performances are great. I mean, when you're talking about like energy on screen, Joaquin Phoenix is like a Heath Ledger playing the Joker. Like once he's on screen, then the energy just turns up, and
That is a very good comparison because it's almost, in some cases, almost to the point of parody, but it. It's like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. Like, it's so cinematic and so over the top, but you don't feel like it's fake. You feel like that it's emoting these things that are very, very genuine.
I was scared most of the time whenever Freddie was on the screen. I was always nervous he was just going to start punching somebody.
He's very intense. Yeah, he's very intense. In a very good
unstable.
way. Yeah, very good way.
Every woman he was around, you're afraid he was going to start strangling her or something.
Well, don't you think even in that Freddie intro, like we haven't seen him beat up anybody, but you're kind of like, I don't know how this guy is going to react.
It wouldn't be too far. It wouldn't surprise you too much to see him just sort of beat up a stranger.
And I think you get that effect just from going back to the Sandwoman, how long that goes on and seeing the other people's reactions. You're kind of amused at first, and then once you get to finger banging, you're kind of like, oh.
Well, let's talk about. I don't think we got really to, we got to address the fact that some reviewers, because after I saw the movie, I wanted to read all the reviews and see what their take was. Some of them commented that the story is incoherent. Is it incoherent? And if it is that so much of a bad thing? And I guess what you could talk about is, say, when they go out and dig up Dodd's, his life's work out of the ground, that scene has nothing to do with anything else. The motorcycling...
There's a lot of scenes in this movie that really have nothing.
They're just kind of like their own little moment that happens that doesn't so much affect anything before or after.
But that's
the jerking him off in the mirror.
Well, I feel like
that's actually a pretty big plot point. I think.
I feel like the Philip Seymour Hoffman hand job scene that was establishing Amy Adams as the real boss.
Sure.
And that I mean, that was just really weird. It was really out of the blue, and she's telling him that he has to stop seeing Freddie while she's jerking him off, and it's just that's how she has control over him.
Well, let's talk about the comments that the story is incoherent, or that it's kind of loose and doesn't feel grounded, and we just look like we're looking at a series of scenes.
Is that because, I mean, I guess in the if you want to talk about the story in the 3-act structure,
no,
sense,
it doesn't have a 3-act.
It doesn't have that at all. Mm-hmm. So what is that? What they're looking for?
I guess maybe that people might be saying is that if it doesn't stick to a 3-act structure, it is therefore incoherent. Therefore, like Tree of Life and every Malick film is incoherent.
I don't know if it's that far off from a 3-act structure. I still feel like there's a introduction, rising, action, and climax, and a resolution. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of done in a way that seems a lot looser. And I don't know. Yeah. Things kind of lead into each other.
It feels funny to say that the movie's loose when it is shot and edited so deliberately and in 65 millimeters.
Yeah.
Too.
I mean, just using the motorcycle scene as an example, I mean, we're seeing kind of more of these exercises, but he goes immediately from that, at least it seems to imply from this one viewing that we've had, that he drives his motorcycle to go resolve his issue with the woman.
Oh, he just leaves, yeah.
So it's not incoherent.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know. Okay, so digging up the writings.
I guess you could say that is, again, showing that trust is established between the two, that the only one he brings with him is Freddie to dig up those books and he buried.
2, he's paranoid about other people.
Yeah, there's that part where he goes, wait a
second. That's also true. Okay, he doesn't trust anyone else but Freddie to go out and dig up those books. That's all, yeah. Again, Philip Seymour Hoffman has no friends, or no, Dodd has no friends.
Yeah, right. That says a lot about Lancaster Dodd. Yeah, that the only person he can really trust in is Freddie.
Yeah, no family members. He doesn't bring his family with him. He doesn't bring He doesn't bring the new son-in-law, who's obviously able-bodied to carry things.
Not only able-bodied, but really
his own son.
He's also kind of really drinking the Kool-Aid. The son-in-law, it seems like. Yeah, he's also kind of an enforcer.
Yeah. You know what? Way. I think that also probably Dodd knows that he's just making it up and he's all bullshit. When someone comes at him who's a true believer, that just adds to the distance. Like, we're not on the same level because I know this is crap. I'm making it up and you believe in me and you believe it's crap. This is making it harder for us to connect.
It's kind of a guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
And you can sort of see that kind of coming to a head when I don't know what's going on with Dodd. It's like he's having a headache or something like that. And Laura Dern is coming up saying, I noticed you changed this word. That's another thing that happened in Scientology all the time is the tech was changed. It changed over time, you know. They called it improving it, you know. But
she asked him why he changed something and he tried to kind of bullshit his way out of it. And when he couldn't, he snaps at him.
Snapped and yelled and, you know. He's a lonely guy. Imagine never being able to have a genuine conversation with anyone around you, you know, because everything around you is based on bullshit.
Right, and everybody around him, all of these people that feel like that he's helping them have nothing but glowing things to say, and they constantly want to try to get at him and, you know, and have time with, which is what the Laura Dern scene was all about. Like, she really just wanted to have an excuse to kind of talk with this guy that's very charismatic and apparently has all the answers. So should we talk about the possible different interpretations of like the last maybe 20 minutes or so?
Are we talking about the theater and the phone?
The theater and the phone, for example?
Is that real or not? I can't believe that's real.
I don't believe it's real. I think they made that pretty clear that it's not real because...
no one, even at that time, I don't think anyone brought a phone to you in the theater while a movie was playing.
Yeah, I mean, he's in a big theater by himself. And the movie just cuts to him in there. We don't know how he got there. I mean, it makes sense that a guy like him would go sleep in a theater. But it's a nice theater. It was a big theater, and it was playing a Casper movie.
Well, this is the 50s, so they were probably doing the cartoon in front of the feature. And blah, blah,
or
blah.
a double feature. And they usually, what they do is they use those old Warner Brothers cartoons to just sort of like stick in between the double feature.
And so you just sit there all day.
But when he goes to England, they're surprised to see him.
Yes.
And he even says, "I had a dream that you were here."
So is it to imply that he has been so ingrained that now this?
I don't know. That's weird.
It's a weird
How would he
kind
know?
of supernatural thing. It kind of reminds me of the Eli Paul Sunday thing from There Will Be Blood. This sort of weird occurrence that the movie never really explains, but it kind of has a lot to do with the plot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, maybe the answer has to do with what we're seeing it from Freddie's perspective. If that's the case, if this whole movie is Freddie's perspective, just like Punch Drunk Love is Adam Sandler's character's perspective, then that's the answer. Then yeah, he wanted an excuse to get back to Lancaster Dodd.
And I can't imagine.
Oh yeah, no, maybe he found out that Dodd was in England some other way, and then he dreamed that he learned that Dodd was in England because he called him in a theater.
Oh, you called to me, so I got to answer this. You know, I got to show up.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt, Freddie's recollection is that accurate.
So it's another case of like the unreliable narrator.
So Dodd, I mean, this probably has nothing to do with anything else. Probably just another weird little incident that happens, which is Dodd explain. What does he explain to Freddie? Like when we met before, we were French Revolution fighters, and
oh, I don't remember. He explains one of their past lives.
Yeah,
It's something about
we only lost 2 balloons, like when we sent messages by balloon or something.
Yeah.
Freddie doesn't respond with anything that important, and then Dodd just sort of sings to him, and then it kind of just shows that Freddie kind of left, and that's where they left it. That's where their relationship just sort of ended there.
Well, what about the line that, if we meet in a future life, you'll be my enemy?
You will be my sworn enemy, and there will be no holding back.
Yeah, you just kind of shake your head at it. I don't know. If it's a
world of nonsense, maybe you just got to just sort of accept the nonsense that's happening.
I didn't think it at the time, but since we've been talking about it and thinking about it right now, I've kind of wondered if that was part of the manipulation. Like, that's something that you say to somebody where you're kind of like, stay with me. Like, in this lifetime, we'll be friends.
Right, because he did say, if you leave now, then in a future lifetime for me, we'll be sworn enemies and there'll be no holding back. And Freddie doesn't give Dodd any kind of assurance that he's going to stay after that, so then Dodd starts singing to him as a last resort sort of thing.
And Freddie cries. I mean, I think they both know it's time.
The only reason that it really can't go on, if you remember, is that Amy Adams' character is there, and she's pretty much putting her foot down. It's like, this guy can't stay. He's too much of a liability. And she leaves the room, and it's kind of like, this is how it is. Like, I want you to stay, in so many words. But
you're right, yeah. I mean, she really makes that call. Mm-hmm. So then they just have a few minutes.
Yeah, she definitely shows more as an authority figure in that scene, and yeah.
It's really interesting. Because it's kind of out of the blue. It's not something that you would necessarily expect, but it's something that's been established. I meant to bring this up. They did really well with extras casting. And the only reason that I bring this up is because it's so easy in casting to have the people that do that job, when you have to cast so many different parts, to get lazy. It's like, oh, I saw this guy in this movie, in this movie, in this movie. Oh, I saw this guy in Gladiator. Like, he looks like he could fit in this spot. We're going to put a suit on him and he's in this spot. That type of thing. Mm-hmm. But they really picked faces that look right. And it's an easy thing to miss. And it's an easy thing to just kind of like, oh, well, yeah, naturally. Like, of course. They did very, very well. It's like all of these people don't look out of place. And it's very delicate. So kudos to the casting.
Well, I think that's something worth being said about this movie, and any good movie, is that this one of the reasons we enjoy this movie as film fans is that everybody involved in this movie is at the top of their game, right? I mean, pointing out something little like that just goes to show,
that there were no shortcuts.
Yeah.
And you really appreciate that because it does make extra work. It would be easy to be like, man, this is, how many months in a row of like 16-hour days, like just settle it, just like whatever. Get Reese Witherspoon and put a dress on her and she's in this movie. But you don't have that. You don't have that, and it's it's really impressive because you get that feeling just like with There Will Be Blood in a lot of his movies. There's no shortcuts. Like every decision is kind of made for a specific reason.
Because of the deliberateness of every second of that movie, the movie is exactly the way it should be. So if you have a problem with the movie, that's kind of your own problem.
That was the connection that I was.
Because when you go into a P.T. Anderson movie, the craftsmanship is so superb. There is so much thought behind how this movie is crafted and what scene follows the next one and the look and feel of everything that you can't just criticize the movie like as if it has the flaws of the same bad movies you've seen before where it is due to negligence. So it's kind of either take it or leave it.
That's where I draw the connection to late Kubrick movies. It's like, probably from Barry Lyndon on, actually, where it's kind of like these deceptively simple movies, and it's like, he has the power and he's shooting all day, and everything that's in there, he has final say, so it's there for a reason. It's kind of up to you to figure out what it is or read it as simply as you want. And inversely, it's kind of like it's the opposite of what Tim Burton and Wes Anderson is, where Wes Anderson gets more and more formal but has like less story behind it, and Tim Burton is all stripes and curly cues.
Curly cues, zebra stripes, and sharp teeth in mouths.
Reimagining.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily there other than to sell a product, which is part of movies, of course. I mean, it is a business and you got to make your money back. They're insanely expensive to make, but it is something to be said about this movie that doesn't need to be shot on a large format film.
What place in history do you think this will be in? Do you think that this will have a huge impact, or you think it may be one of PTA's lesser movies that, because it doesn't stand out as iconically as There Will Be Blood with the bowling pin, and
No, it wasn't as loud as There Will Be Blood. It didn't have a milkshake scene.
Wasn't as showy, no one-liner stuff.
No, but I think it's really going to shine when we look back at PTA's filmography.
Especially after more films have come out.
Yeah, I think it's really going to shine as the first true Paul Thomas Anderson film.
You think this is kind of his Lolita?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really it's all him.
That's interesting.
I didn't see a lot of Scorsese. I didn't see a lot of Altman.
That is also a good point, because that's been my complaint with a little bit with Boogie Nights, more so with Magnolia, maybe a little bit with Punch Drunk Love. He's kind of in that film student kind of mindset. But I especially love There Will Be Blood the most because that felt where he was really standing out at it as his own voice in film.
Well, not to diminish his previous films, but yeah, I mean, I think definitely up until Punch Drunk Love, we really see Paul Thomas Anderson learning and experimenting and trying to kind of get in his own groove, and I think he's in his groove. I think this is it.
Yeah, don't you feel like there's a big jump between Punch Drunk Love and There Will Be Blood? I mean, I felt like there was like a quantum jump in terms of filmmaking.
I'll admit that I was not that excited about There Will Be Blood when I first heard about it. I thought, oh, okay, that guy, his movies look good, and he knows how to follow the right steps from previous filmmakers.
I think There Will Be Blood still felt like all of his movies a bit showy, and this one felt like he was being really honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's more restrained this time, I think.
The thing that I was excited about hearing about the idea of There Will Be Blood and seeing the trailer and everything, I was like, oh, finally somebody gave that butcher character from Gangs of New York his own movie, which is like, I mean, that was the best of Gangs of New York, was like, I just wanted to spend all the time with this crazy character.
With Bill the Butcher.
With Bill the Butcher. And I was like, well, finally they gave Bill the Butcher his own movie, and it's really not that far off, really. But of course it had ultimately a different point. But no, it's not showy, and that maybe is kind of confounding people, because it's like, well, what's the ultimate point? It doesn't tell you necessarily how to feel. But of course, for obsessives, that makes it really interesting.
But I mean, I'm saying like when it's 2020, when we look back, The Master may be looked at as, ooh, this is one of those new kind of movies that was new back then.
Or it could be one of those things like, wow, I mean, when everybody was going digital, this guy shot it on a large format when he didn't have to. It was a real holdout. You know, it was kind of like somebody recording an album on analog equipment. It's really tough to say. Because increasingly in the next 10 years, nobody's going to really care about film. They're just going to shoot on the red because it's comparable. Nobody really knows the difference, and who cares? But no, I think it's a definite statement.
I'm pretty sure after more viewings and after more time, this movie's going to be a lot better to me. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely stuck with me since we saw it. I haven't stopped thinking about it. So I really want to see it again, and I think it is going to stand as one of his best movies. And I'm really looking forward.
That happens often with Anderson. You start out kind of you're not on board entirely, and then after more viewings,
I will say that with maybe the exception of There Will Be Blood, which I pretty much realized I really loved.
Yeah, I knew There Will Be Blood was one of the greatest movies of all time. Exiting the theater, you know?
But all of his other ones I had to warm up to.
Yeah,
like even something that's pretty straightforward, like Boogie Nights, I was going, it's just all this Scorsese stuff, like whatever.
Kind of a little self-indulgent.
Yeah, but no, now you see what all the technique that he's using, and it's really amazing actually. Yeah. And again, like all of the other aspects of the movie are very top notch. So,
and I think it's just a really exciting time. I'm really happy that we get to witness this filmmaker because I mean he's young, he's just now really getting big. You know, he has that new producer who seems to be very supportive.
And it seems like the most important thing on that line is to show that you're bankable. And if you can get people behind you that are kind of like, yeah, all right, well, if we let him do what he wants, he's still going to make his money back, then yeah, imagine what you're going to see.
Sure.
I feel like
hope for good movies.
Well, I feel like that's the point. That's the point that he's at, where it's kind of like, oh, well, no matter what he does, he even did this movie about Scientology that should sink this guy.
Yeah.
And it's doing well, so it's a really good sign.
Yeah.
Even though I like Anderson, even though whenever I see him interviewed, he has this "I've been a naughty boy" look on his face. You notice that?
Well, to be fair,
he has this mischievous look, like
he has been a naughty boy. To be fair.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. That was our review of The Master. Go see it in 70mm if you can. Support good movies.
Wow.